USCHO.com.
Welcome to USCHO Spotlight for Wednesday, November 1st, 2023. I'm Ed Trefzger alongside Jim Connelly. Every season in college hockey, there are some surprises, and the biggest one this year has to be the early performance of the Wisconsin Badgers.
And joining us now on USCHO Spotlight is the editor emeritus of USCHO.com. We're going to call him that at least today. And he's a reporter for the Wisconsin State Journal. Covers the Badgers. That's Todd Milewski. Todd, great to be joined with you, and great to see this Wisconsin team under a new head coach, under a new regime. They're off to a really nice start.
Yeah, thanks for having me, guys. Good to talk to you as always. And yeah, this is I think what a lot of Badgers fans hoped for when the coaching change was made last March. I don't know if anyone necessarily thought it was going to happen this quickly, this many wins this quickly. And I've been trying to throw some caution in here that, you know, they're 7-1, but it's October. I think you guys said it on a podcast earlier this week. You don't win anything in October. You can do some good building. You can set some good foundation, and you can get some wins that will end up meaning something towards the end of the season. But there's still a long way to go in what Mike Hastings wants to do with this program in terms of building the culture and building the just the style of play and the what that means shift to shift for Wisconsin.
You just kind of said it. Hope was high, but execution is one of those things that you never know how it will work out. I want to go into what you see day to day in terms of what has changed. And obviously personnel is a big part of it. A lot of transfers from Minnesota State. I don't know if I've ever seen that many players follow a coach. Not sure that it was ever the option because of the transfer portal was not as open as it is now. But a lot of players followed Hastings, but he also had to integrate systems. I look at this top couple of scorers, still guys that played at Wisconsin. They're not guys that came across with them. What's working for this team at this point that seems a little bit different than it was during the Granato era?
Well, there's a couple ways I can get at that. And one of them is I spent a lot of the last week's series the Badgers played at Minnesota, kind of watching how their back checking was different. In a lot of the past seasons, we'd see them come back, they'd get there, but there would be kind of not a great awareness of what the assignment was or which guy, who do I have? That communication wasn't always there. And I saw that, especially in the first game against Minnesota, when they were back checking, they got there right away and they knew who was their guy. And that to me that's how you end up with only giving up 12 goals over 8 games. That, and, obviously you've got a goalie in Kyle McClellan, who's played a lot better than he did last season. No, even though he wasn't bad last season, he never got the stretches of time in goal that we've seen from him so far this season. But just the confidence level we're seeing out of him so far has been really good. And so those two things, I think, from a kind of a systematic approach and one from a player personnel approach, have combined to get them off to a really good start of the season.
How surprised were you that McClellan at this point has played every game in every minute? I guess that was something that I think a lot of people questioned going into this season for Wisconsin, who would be their goalie, but they're riding a single.
Yeah, because going into the first week of the season, when they played Augustana that Saturday and Sunday of the first week of the season, Mike Hastings said, going into the week, I haven't seen anyone jump up and take the number one job. And so Kyle McClellan was kind of like just got the first chance. He gets a shutout of Augustana the first night, gets another shutout of Augustana the second night. And so you're starting to think, well, okay, you've got to keep going with him. And he said later, Hastings said later that he probably wasn't expecting to go back with McClellan that second night against Augustana because, he wanted to see they've got a freshman, William Grommy, who's, they want to see him play. They want to see what he can do. But there's, just no, when a guy goes out and gives you a shutout, you feel like sometimes you got to go back to him and see if he can do it again. And he did that. And he's been able to ride that through these first 4 weeks of the season, putting together some pretty good outings. Even the one game that the Badgers lost at North Dakota, gave up 2 goals, didn't get a lot of help on either one of them. And it's been something where he's established himself, keeps giving them reasons to put him back out there. And so they haven't been able to, I suppose there's a possibility that you're going to see someone else in the next couple of weeks. But right now, McClellan's giving you the reason to say, let's go back with him.
Just picking up a little more on McClellan, you think back to Mike Hastings' years at Minnesota State and 4 years of Dryden McKay and that terrific numbers, but also not seeing a lot of shots and also a very defensive program. Is this back checking that you're seeing so far from the team? Is that really part of giving the confidence and giving the success to McClellan and net?
I think that's definitely part of it. He's also, made some, it goes both ways, right? The goalie needs the confidence of everyone else, and everyone else needs to have the confidence in the goalie, because that lets you, as the 5 players in front of him, play a little freer, be able to take a few more chances. And he's backed him up on the couple of times that it's fallen apart. I look back to, I can't remember which game. I think the second game against Minnesota last week, there was a couple of rebounds right in front, and Snuggerud had the puck on a stick twice, and McClellan made 2 really good saves. He made a shorthanded save on Aaron Huglin right before Wisconsin took the lead in that game, if I am remembering it right, or maybe that was the night before. But those kind of moments fuel the rest of the team. You're on the bench, you see, okay, he's going well. Our goalie, we need to back him up, but we also need to make sure we get the goals on the other side. And they found kind of those timely goals of finding the right combinations and getting a couple of power play goals when they really need them. Think back to a game at Bemidji State. They were trailing the third period and scored on the power play late to force overtime, and they won it there. Those are little things that add up to a bigger picture.
As well liked as Tony Granato was as an alum and as a person, as a by all accounts, a great human being, rumblings around the program were that maybe the effort that was required of players wasn't really pushed that hard, maybe a little looser, maybe not as disciplined. Do you see a change now around the program under Mike Hastings, just demeanor and pregame things, that sort of stuff?
I think maybe that's from a 30,000 foot view of it, that's the biggest change, is that there's expectations and there are consequences if things aren't met. Be it off ice, on ice, practice, games. All the players I've talked to that played for Mike Hastings at Minnesota State, especially the ones that played for him in those early years when he first took over there, said that accountability and discipline are the biggest things coming from him. And I think from what I've been able to gather here at Wisconsin from players I've talked to, nothing has changed there. Now Mike Hastings has said that he has to do things a little bit differently than he did 11 years ago in Mankato, because, coaching is different now. And there are, players need to know the whys instead of, hey, just do this because I'm the coach and I said so. And he said he had to try to, he's changed the way he works within that concept and within that framework, I guess. And I think you can see that there's been results from that with his teams at Minnesota State. And I think that is a big part of the reason why we're seeing, a Wisconsin team at 7-1 and, still building off of that, early in the season. They're not, obviously they're excited with where they are, but they're not, satisfied with where they are.
Speaking of where they are, a week ago, you pointed out it was the first time since October of 2021 that the Badgers were in the USCHO.com men's Division I ice hockey poll at number 14 this week, all the way up to number 5 in 5 first place votes. Are the voters being generous, or are they being accurate in recognizing Wisconsin at this point?
I think maybe the first place voters are being a little generous, but I don't know that, that 5 is necessarily too far off. If you're taking just, what we've seen so far this season, and some of this, when I'm a voter and I'm looking at, how I rank 1 through 20 every week, early in the season, it's tough because you're trying to balance what you've seen so far in, only maybe for some teams, right now, that are just getting started, a couple of games, and then some teams with 8 games. But you also have to blend in what your expectations were going into the season for that team. And maybe that's based on what you saw in past years. So I think after more of the season, you get to base it just on what we've seen this season. But right now, I still think we're looking a little basing on preseason expectations for teams. But with Wisconsin, I think just results for 4 weeks have said a lot. 7 wins, the 1 loss against North Dakota. I thought they were pretty much in that game too. That was definitely not something where they were outclassed. And I thought that was an important sign for them at that point, that they said, yeah, this is a top 10 team. We're right there with them. And they built off of that. They took that as a, something to build on, and then went to Michigan Tech and swept 2 games there. And then last weekend swept the 2 games at Minnesota. That's a tough road stretch, 6 games in a row against Bemidji, North Dakota, Michigan Tech, and Minnesota. And they did really well with that, which I think also fuels that, where you can say Wisconsin's a top 5 team.
More with Badgers writer Todd Milewski in a moment. We're back with Wisconsin State Journal writer Todd Milewski. I hate to use the term long-suffering, but it might apply to the Wisconsin fan base that had maybe one exception in the past few years in Cole Caulfield's final season that ended in a little bit of disappointment in the NCAAs. But the cavernous Kohl Center has been particularly cavernous the past few years. Do we expect to see that turnaround, maybe even turn around very quickly this weekend with Michigan coming in?
I'm interested to see that, honestly, Ed, because it's, the season ticket numbers were not very good this season from what I've seen. They've gone down again, but I know they expect, winning to help that. They think that the Wisconsin administrators think, if people will come back, if we can give them something to come back for and have a consistent winner here. And that's obviously one of the big reasons why they had to make a change last season. You said earlier, Tony Granato is a really well-liked person around here, and he's a really quality human being who's done a lot of great things for this city and this university. And I don't think there's anyone out there that says an unkind word about him as a person, but you saw what the team results were, how they were trending, and you saw where the attendance numbers were trending, and not necessarily in the announced attendances. They're still in the top 3, I think, in the country, just because they have still a fairly large, compared to other schools, season ticket base. But the number of people in the seats last season was got noticeably smaller, and it's been going that way for a few years. And so, yeah, this is a big year if they can get some excitement going. And it usually happens after the football season, when you get out of November a little bit and can get more people interested in other things. But I think this series coming up this week against Michigan is going to be an interesting look at. It's not going to be a full Kohl Center. We know that it hasn't been that way for a long time, and they've got a long way to go to do anything like that. But if they can get 1,000, 2,000 more fans in there than they would have otherwise, that's a start of something.
Todd, I want to go back to what you said about, and I'm going to put words in your mouth here a little bit. You didn't say Hastings is a player's coach, but that's kind of the way I interpreted a little bit of what you said earlier about how he deals with players. And I saw it myself. I think it was a regional back in maybe 2019 or so, where I was in the room for ESPN interviews, and his players, they were the number one seed in Providence, and his players were the loosest players in the room. And it just seemed like his personality rubbed off on the players a little bit. I know it's early and I know it's not easy to see, but can you see a difference in the players to see that they might be a little different? And maybe Wisconsin's just a place that even the loosest coach can still tighten up any players because of the expectations. But what do you see in terms of just maybe a change in the personality of the player?
I think there's something there, Jimmy, but I think there's, let's put it this way. I see players that know when they need to be serious and when they need to be working and when they need to be on point in terms of, you get this many hours a week with the coaches on the ice, you better use it. And I think that's one of the emphasis that has been made by this new coaching staff to use your time wisely and give an extra effort when you can, because that's what's contagious around a team, is that if somebody else sees you working hard, they're going to want to work hard too. That has been something that players and coaches have said it has been a real focus for them in building the relationships that, between a coaching staff and players. And that's something that I think Mike Hastings does really well from what people have said. Maybe not necessarily these players here. You don't necessarily always get the honest opinion of a player about a coach until, maybe a few years after they're done playing for that coach and they've experienced it all and can kind of look back at what it all was like and what it did for them. But I remember talking to some Minnesota State players who just seemed like really valued the kind of relationship and the kind of, I guess, importance that Mike Hastings put on building that with them. And Hastings said earlier this season that he's one of the things he has done differently here was that he's made sure he stayed in town and been around the players a lot more instead of going out to do recruiting. Just because he wants to be around, he wants to build something with them and make sure they know that his door is open and he'll talk about whatever you want to talk about. And he made that, he referenced that just this week when I was asking about, the issue of more neck protection with the tragedy that we saw last weekend. I was asking whether that was something that anyone had brought up, and he said, we want to have that conversation. I want my players to come in and talk about that, and let's talk about what you want, what you need, what you think we should do. And those are the kind of things that I think he's trying to establish that, the dialogue with a new group. Now you've mentioned he's got a few players with him that know what that is like from Minnesota State, and they've been put in some pretty big roles here earlier this season, which I think is important to consider too. That it's those guys have been able to help a lot in terms of being a bridge between new coaching staff here and new group of players. They know what it's been like for them and can kind of help with some of the players who don't, and in terms of what to expect and how to work in that system.
You just touched on something that was going to be my closing question here. You wrote a great story today, Madison.com and the Wisconsin State Journal, about neck guards. And I think that's a very serious issue in all levels of hockey after the tragic passing of Adam Johnson, the former Minnesota Duluth player who was killed over in the English Ice Hockey League. You talked about it as, you just mentioned it, an option for players. Derek Scully, who is with us, Robert Morris head coach, on Mondays, he talked about it. Sometimes he said, players were seen as, wimpy if they wore a neck guard. I hope that this tragedy changes a little bit here, but What are you hearing out there? And I know you've investigated this a little bit on a cursory level, but it feels like this is something that has to change at all levels of hockey.
Yeah, there's going to be a lot of conversations about that. And I know it's there are two sides of it in terms of NCAA hockey. There's the NCAA Ice Hockey Committee, Division I Men's Ice Hockey Committee, has one part of it, and the rules committee that governs, the four areas: men's Division I, women's National Collegiate, men's Division III, women's Division III. They cover all of those on the rules side. They have another part of it. And so over the summer, when the committee was the men's Division I committee was meeting, they wanted to ask the rules committee to examine more of what we should be mandating in terms of equipment for neck protection and probably really for wrist protection too. You talk about that. That's another sensitive area and that doesn't have a lot of protection, especially as gloves have gotten a little shorter over the years. That's something that came up over the summer. The rules committee, as I understand it, discussed it, didn't want to right away mandate anything, knowing that equipment like that is not in high supply. So if you're talking about, requiring that as a rules committee over four division, men's and women's in two different divisions, that's a lot of new equipment that would be needed in a short amount of time. And you've seen with the England Association, they're going to require that for their players starting in January, but they didn't do it right away because they knew it was going to take a while to get some stock of equipment in for everyone to have it. And so there's a lot of factors in there, but yeah, you see a day where you talked about what Derek said about, how in some days, players are looked at differently for wearing equipment like that. Well, players were looked at differently for wearing helmets back in the day too, and goalie masks. And it, there's just an evolution of the game. And I think this is probably part of it as we go forward. What the timeline is on that, I don't know, but I think it's something that is going to be brought up and is going to be something that I would guess at some point becomes mandatory or just becomes part of the equipment, whether it's part of the undershirt or a separate, neck piece of equipment that goes around the neck, like we see in players in in some of the major junior leagues. It seems like it's got to go towards that direction in some way. I just don't know, what and when.
I thought it was a great piece to start the conversation. Read more from Todd Milewski, Madison.com, the Wisconsin State Journal. He does a great job with USCHO as an advisor and Frozen Four time. I'll tell you, nobody runs the table better than Todd. And until the Badgers make the Frozen Four, that'll screw us all up if that happens. But
let's not go there yet. But best week of the year, Frozen Four week. But let's not get the cart ahead of the horse.
That's true. Todd, thanks for your time. We always appreciate it, and we'll be certainly catching up with you as the season progresses.
Of course, guys. Great to talk to you.
That's Todd Milewski from the Wisconsin State Journal and also editor emeritus of USCHO. Jim, it's interesting to hear about the atmosphere and culture and demeanor of players. That was one of the first things I thought about back when Mike Hastings was named to the Badgers job last spring.
I have always enjoyed Mike Hastings as a person and as a coach because I think that he approaches things a little bit differently. He gets a lot of performance. He gets players to buy into his system. He gets players to understand what they're trying to do. But I've always felt that his players do it in a different way, a little less tense, a little more lighthearted. And I'm not trying to say that in a bad way. I don't think that these are players that go in and relax in big games. They're very serious what they do and they accomplish a lot. He has a great track record from not just Minnesota State, but his days with the Omaha Lancers, a fantastic coach in the USHL. I think that if he can bring and continue to bring that to the Wisconsin culture, to the Wisconsin program and change things a little bit there, it's helpful. But now I'm going to give the caveat. There's a lot of pressure at a school like Wisconsin. It's a Big Ten school. And I look at everything they do when they're successful and you get a lot of praise. But the second you have a little bit of adversity, a little bit of failure, the fan base there is very difficult. So I think that is one of the biggest challenges that will face Mike Hastings. He's a pretty good guy though, and a gritty guy. You don't think of that like he feels like I don't know the right expression. Like he feels like a teddy bear. Like you kind of want to hug him because he's a nice guy, and you like to get to know a guy like that. But at the same time, you know that he wants to win. And I think that's the side of him that will come out hopefully to the fans of Wisconsin. Because I'm not sure that they need a teddy bear. They kind of need somebody that's a little gritty in there. He has both sides to him. And I think he will have some success, early season success, very transparent right now, 7-1, 2 wins over the nationally ranked #1 team. That's a pretty good statement to start a year.
That is a good way to start, but I think it was Alan Greenspan that coined the phrase irrational exuberance. You got to rein things in a little bit. Still 28 more games to play because they pick up 2 extra games in the schedule because of the icebreaker. A lot can happen. And once you get into mostly Big Ten play, you know that's going to be a gauntlet. So, but I have to say, and I wrote this earlier this week on TMQ, I approached this season thinking, you know what? Mike Hastings is going to have him right back in the mix within a couple of seasons. I didn't think within a couple of weeks.
And I'm still not sure they'll get there. I mean, yes, they're in the mix now. You climb that high in the USCHO poll, people start taking notice. You get more bullseyes on your back. But I do believe this program's headed in the right direction, and it's because of a coach. And I don't want to take anything away from Mike Eaves. I don't want to take anything away from Tony Granato. Obviously, Mike Eaves won a national championship. I think that Tony Granato and his family have a great hockey history, and he was a great coach. Some coaches work out at certain schools, some for other reasons do not. I do believe that this is a team that will head in the right direction. Do I see them winning the Big Ten right out of the gate? Maybe not. This league is an absolute gauntlet. I think it's really hard to navigate this league. 7 great teams. There's not a single team in that league that if I'm playing them out of conference, coming from Hockey East or the ECAC, I'd say, oh, this is an easy game. There's no easy game in that league. I don't know who will be the bottom team in that league, whether Penn State, Notre Dame, Ohio State, Michigan State. I don't know. Michigan, Minnesota, for that matter. All of them could possibly fall. But they're all going to be good teams at the end of the day. So I think that there is nothing easy when you really come down to it, no matter where you are in that league. It is just a gauntlet. That's the only word I can use to describe how to navigate that league.
Well, it's going to be fun to watch, and certainly it's a terrific start to the season for the Badgers. For Jim Connelly, I'm Ed Trefzger, and this has been USCHO Spotlight, and we'll see you next week.